Hi class. My name is Prem Asim Jain and we are going to cover exception handling. So in the last lecture we have seen what basically exception is, and what we understood is any program has a normal path of execution, but sometime when the things does not go the way they are intended, and then there is some way to handle those, and those things are called as the exceptional path, and that's how you can get your program control flow back into the regular stream instead of terminating it abruptly. So that's what we have learned. What we tried in the last lecture was try, catch, and then finally blocks. Today we are going to learn how we can throw our own exception and how throws work. So there is a little difference in these two keywords, which is throw and throws. Throw throw and throws throws, a verb and a noun kind of. So we gonna do the actual program of that, how that works, and then we'll learn that. So what happens is throw basically it throws an object of whatever class, whichever is exception, and you can intend to throw your own exception or the system provided exception on need basis. So we have seen the example. Let's go real quick to the code. So it should be in Premasim exceptions, and we have our own custom exception. So what we did is we have our own custom exception, and let us format the code so that it can look a little bit neat. Okay, so here what we did is we have this method, and whosoever is calling this method, if some condition which alters our path was if someone who is more than 15 years should allow to drive. Based on that assumption, the normal program was going through to give the license process in our program. But since age is less, we want that we just want to quit the program, and we should have some message, or we just want to catch those condition, whatever. It's just imaginary, but just imagine that this is this piece of code here, whichever the method calls over here. After this, rest of the code should get executed. Simple. So we use throw new under age exception. This was the exception. You can create any exception just by extending the exception class, and then once this exception is thrown, there are two ways to the caller. Either you catch the exception then and there, if it is a caught. So there are two categories of exception. One is caught exception, which you have to catch it, and one is uncaught exception. So in this case, what this program complains us: unhandled exception. So you cannot keep the exception unhandled. What does that mean is this exception has been thrown over here. So you have two options. Either you add exception in the method signature. So here you say throws s. Here it was throw and here it is throws, which means that this method, basically this method from here to here, has some code which is risky code, and it is going to throw some exception. So either you handle it and suppress it then and there, or if you are not willing to suppress it then and there, then in the method signature you have to declare that this exception has been thrown. So whichever method calls this method has two options: either that method catches it, or that method has to throw it. So basically we came here. Now this will give us two options. Either we add the exception to the signature whosoever is the caller, or we surround it with try and catch. So we have thrown it here. So there is something which is called as the stack, method stack. Method 1 is calling method 2, method 2 is calling method 3, so whosoever. This is something like there is one responsibility. If you either you solve the problem, if you don't solve, then it will go to your teacher. If teacher does not solve, then it will go to the principal. If he does not solve it, then it will go to the next level, maybe the education minister or whatever. So there is a hierarchy. So either you have to catch, or you have to send it or duck it to the next level, whosoever is calling in the caller stack. So now this program would be fine to run. Let's try and run this. So it is saying that exception has been thrown, which is good because exception has been thrown and nobody has handled it. So it has propagated. What we can do here is, let's do a control Z and let's go back in time. So we are calling this, and this guy where it throws exception, it declares, then we can catch it here, because in here you will see that rest of the code line hasn't been executed. So your program has abrupt or terminated in an abnormal way. So let's try and have a safety catch around it, safety net. So this is your net, safety net. Now you can say here is south system.out.println, we have handled the error gracefully. So this handling can be anything. You can say, hey kid, you're not allowed to get a license in your software program, and handle it basically. But just let's try to run this. So now we are running it, and it says rest of the code has been executed fine. We have handled the error properly. An exception, so once the exception got created over here, so this guy inside the constructor, the message have came up. Let us see line numbers. So line number 19, this was the method which was when called, then this method, and this method then called the constructor. So this is just showing all those messages over here. So let's go back to the theory now. So exception propagation is something what we just have understood with the example that if you don't solve the problem, it will go to teacher and then headmaster and all that. So there is something which is called which is the call stack. So man program calls P calls N calls M. So M, if catches the exception then and there, then it would not propagate. If somehow you don't want M to handle it, then it can be propagated to the next layer or the next level. So this is a program for the same. We'll just try to run it on the browser itself real quick. So you see that exception is handled and normal flow is coming up because you have got it here itself at this level. And what's the level is, this is your main. You have created an object, you're calling P is calling N is calling M, and M is going to have some trouble with divide by zero arithmetic exception. So M has thrown the exception to its immediate caller N has passed it to P, and P has handled it, and then it printed this message over here. So this is how it worked. Now we'll go next. So the throw keyword is used to declare an exception. It gives an information to the programmer that there may occur an exception So it is better for a programmer to provide the exception handling code so normal flow can be maintained. Exception handling is mainly used to handle the checked exception. If there occurs an unchecked exception such as NPE, null pointer exception, it is programmer's fault and he is not performing checkup before the code is being used. So this is something which is like compulsory needs to be handled. But the unchecked exception basically is you can do the condition check. If something is not null, then you should call it. So you will see several programmers which they'll do something like this. If you have data is equal to whatever value which even you don't know. Fine, so for now let's say it's some value 10 and you are trying to do data.toString, any method you're going to call. So what they'll do is if they have doubt that this value could be null because they haven't initialized and they are expecting it from some other program, so they'll have a null check. If null is not equal to data, then only they'll call this. Otherwise what happens that if programmer, so this is how prevention is better than cure. So if you don't check this, and then it can cause the exception. Same thing is with the divide by zero error. So you can see you're trying to do numerator divide by denominator, for example data, and then it is going to get divided by denominator. And in case if denominator is 0 and you are trying to perform data is divided by denominator in some of the program, you can say data is equal to data divided by denominator. So now this is what is called as defensive coding. So if someone asks you, hey buddy, do you know what is defensive coding? And you can say yes, this is defensive coding, which means that you're taking care of your conditions well before in advance if this is not 0. So you can totally avoid the exception. You don't need to do try catch or whatever, because you already know you might end up having a 0 and then this division will create the exception divide by 0 or the null pointer exception. So you are just taking care of it well before. So that's defensive coding because it allows your program to run gracefully without any aggressions. Now rule, if you're calling method that declares an exception, you must either catch or declare the exception. That's what we tried in our program, that if you don't catch it, then you have to declare it. Catching means you need to put a try or catch block. Otherwise, you have to just say that this method throws this exception. For example, again here, it throws this, either you catch it or you declare it and it's thrown to the other caller method. Program if exception does not occur. So this is you can still throw the exception even though that kind of exception is not occurring. So we'll just try. Okay, so it whenever you're trying, you're anticipating, you can throw any number of the exceptions. That is fine. You don't have to do it one. So your program can have multiple exception which might occur in your code. So just to be defensive, or whosoever is trying to call your validate method can have a safety net around it with some different messages. So in case you declare the exception, if exception does not occur, the code will execute fine. In case you declare the exception, if exception occurs, then exception would be thrown at the runtime, because throws does not handle the exception. Throws just declares it. So we are going to read about it, the differences, basically what actually are differences, and this is a very good concept for interviews and in general for understanding, Java in depth. So first point, throw. Java throw is used to explicitly throw an exception, and Java throws keyword is used to declare an exception. So the main difference is either you declare it or you are throwing it. So throw means you are explicitly throwing. The condition can meet or cannot meet wherever. In a normal program, here also you can just first line you can use throw, th, or throw anything. You can throw null pointer exception. Why it is wrong? Because it does not, it needs an object, so we'll create the object of null pointer exception. Now it is cool. And this guy says that it is unhandled, so we might need to catch another exception because we added the exception here and then we have not caught it. So there are two ways. Either you can catch one exception and throw one exception at the same time. So you can, so throws this, and it is saying unreachable statement. Okay, so unreachable statement is as soon as your program is going to start and it's going to throw the exception, so this code might never reach. So compiler is giving you an error or a warning that your program might not work at all because you're throwing this. So two ways is you can put it after this. Now whatever is here, it's unreachable. So just to make it reachable, you can again put it in try catch, and then it should be good. It should compile fine, it should run fine and everything. The rest of the code executed fine. So exception occurred, exception got handled, exception got printed, and your normal flow of the program ran fine without any issues. Now we are going to see that second difference. Checked exception cannot be propagated using throw only. Checked exception can be propagated with throws. So checked exception means IO exception which you need to handle. So either you handle it or you can throw it. So checked exception cannot be propagated. So you cannot throw a IO exception because null pointer you can throw, but you cannot throw IO exception or SQL exception or whatever. They're system generated. Now throw is followed by an instance and throws is followed by a class. This is what we just tried here. Is our program was giving us trouble when we were trying to throw this, because after throw, if you will give it a class, it will cry, it won't like it. So you have to make the object over here. Similar, when you say throw, it has to has a class. If you are trying to make some object over here, it won't allow you. So this is another minor difference between throw and throws. Then throw is used within the method, throws is used with the method signature. So this entire stuff is called as method signature. Like the validate method has a return type, takes some parameters and throws the exception. This entire stuff is called as the method signature. However, so throws is the part of method signature, and throw is used within the method. You cannot throw multiple exception, you can declare multiple exception. So we tried over here that we are trying two exceptions here. The same thing if you would like to try couple of them together, the null np is, so it won't like it. So we can try more because that is different error. It won't like it because once you throw the exception here, this code will become whatever after the throw keyword becomes non-reachable. So this won't be required over here. So this is what throw and throws basically comes here. So we are gonna finish this thing here, and now we learn about the inner classes in our next lecture.